look at their convention, and there's 4 days and a keynote speech by Biden that not one time was any of the protests mentioned, any of the rising violence in the major cities and it mentioned. Not one time did they mention it. Are you confident that this party will confront the unbelievable rise in violence in America? Are you confident that would happen?
In fact, the protests have largely been peaceful. This idea that American
I just gave you the stats. Are you rejecting the stats I just gave you?
Is fallacious, Bill. There are people in a few square block area in Portland that get over the top. There are people that have for 1 or 2 nights. And listen, Bill, no one, including Joe Biden, who has condemned violence, who has condemned rioting, who has condemned looting very clearly and very plainly, no one is out there. There is no pro-violence demo inside this country.
There isn't. Okay. Look, you saw and heard in last week's debate Joe Biden say the authorities in Oregon can control this. Are you blanking kidding me? It's more than 100 days. And Biden says the authorities in Oregon can control it? Wait, all I'm asking you, Rick, is as a thinking person, you're a smart guy. Doesn't that bother you a little bit?
Look, they can control it. And the solution, Bill, is not to apply federal force in states in a way that is directed by the White House. That is something that, as a conservative, I find the expansion of state police power and the use of state police power by the federal government to be something that should be in the most extraordinary circumstances.
You're willing to watch a Portland, Oregon be destroyed from top to bottom? And when you see Kenosha, and the governor there did, at President Trump's suggestion, call the guard in, stopped it cold, so Kenosha still stands, but Seattle and Portland don't, and you're okay with that?
Portland, Bill, trust me. I've been in Seattle recently. It was not the radioactive Mad Max hellscape you think it is. It is a thriving, vital city. There's not a giant area. The whole panic about the Chaz was about a block and a half area that was there for that had some protesters in it for a couple of days. This country, Bill, is largely stable. It is largely peaceful. It is largely quiet.
Look,
things that you're trying to portray.
You live in Florida, and I live in New York. And I know that New York City is the most violent in my lifetime. I see it every day. My friend Rick Moranis was just punched in the face by a stranger, and the police tell me it happens a dozen times a day. Chicago, the stats speak for themselves. So I have one more question for you. Aren't you a Democrat now? You're not really a Republican anymore. I mean, to say that Portland can handle it, that Oregon can handle it, that's all Democrat. That's what they believe. Republicans don't believe that. So, and there's no problem if you've shifted over. I mean, you got to go by your conscience. But aren't you a Democrat now?
Say that. That's before you, listen, I am a believer in the rule of law. I'm a believer in the Constitution. I'm a believer in the 10th Amendment, which we all used to be in favor of, which said that anything that wasn't a direct federal responsibility redounded to the states. I believe that the use of federal police power should be tightly constrained. I believe the use of executive power should be tightly constrained. These are the same positions I had during Barack Obama that I now have during Donald Trump. The fact that Donald Trump is a man who believes in expansive authoritarian power by the executive is something that I find objectionable as a conservative.
All right, but here's what I don't understand, and I'm a simple man, as you know. You work for perhaps the most authoritarian mayor in the history of this country, Rudy Giuliani. You worked for him for years and advised him. How could you work for that kind of an authoritarian presence and now decry the authoritarian presence of Donald Trump?
Because the authoritarian nature of the presidency under Donald Trump is a constitutional crisis. Rudy was a locally elected mayor. He was locally elected to address a specific problem in New York at that time. Now, if Bill de Blasio or whoever the next mayor of New York is going to be doesn't take on crime, there will be a response to it by the voters. But that is not the federal government's responsibility, in my view, as a conservative, to go into the cities and say, I'm going to manage the way a municipality governs. Now, what if there is a president, say Kamala Harris someday, who says, I don't like the way that Huntsville, Alabama is running things, and I'm going to go in there and seize all the guns. I mean, these things, you don't want to break institutional norms. You don't want to break the constitutional boundaries where states and localities should have their control and the federal government should have its. That, to me, Bill, is where a conservative decides that you have to call BS on Donald Trump.
But Trump didn't do that. He didn't send them in. He sent some federal marshals in to protect federal property. He absolutely has a right to do that in Portland, but he wasn't asked in. But I'll tell you what, Portland and Oregon are done, and their local people, and for Michelle Obama to say, oh, it's just a little thing, when it's record breaking. There have never, even in the height of the Vietnam War protests, nothing like what happened after Floyd. And for her to get on there and diminish it frightens me.
You had entire sections of Washington burned to the ground. And in Portland right now, there is about a 2-block area where this goes on.
The whole city is done. I used to work, I know people there. I used to work there. There isn't a business that's making any money in Portland, Oregon. It's all shot, all finished.
I did not notice the pall of smoke rising over the city. It was pretty peaceful and some good restaurants. So.
All right. Look, spirited debate as we like, Rick, and we really appreciate you coming on. You're welcome anytime. Thank you. All right.
Bill O'Reilly is back on TV and only on The First. No Spin News, every weeknight at 8 p.m. Eastern, only on The First.